Hello, welcome to your first audio lecture. Today's lecture will be a continuation of the lecture we started on Friday on the basics of play analysis. That lecture focused mostly on structure, and this one will focus on dramatic characters. So as a reminder, here are the elements that Aristotle identified as being crucial to any play. As I said, we talked about plot last week, and today's lecture will focus on characters. The other elements, as a reminder, are thought or idea, which is the theme, the diction or verbal expression, which is the play's language, song, and spectacle. I asked that you read E.F.'s Visit to a Small Planet before doing this audio lecture. So if you haven't done that yet, pause the recording, go and read it, and then come back and listen. It's a very short article. It was written by Eleanor Fuchs, who is a now retired professor from Yale University. And I like this article because it is a different perspective on how to approach play analysis than what we get from Aristotle. So I appreciate Fuchs's metaphor that reading a play is like visiting another planet, and you really need to pay attention to all aspects of the world in order to get a full picture of what's going on in it. Fuchs begins her article with a very important reminder. She says, quote, "We must make the assumption that in the world of the play there are no accidents. Nothing occurs by chance, not even chance. In that case, nothing in the play is without significance." So what this says is that we are free to analyze anything that happens in the play. Just as when we analyze live performance, we're free to analyze any aspect of the live performance, even if it was something that happened by chance. She also reminds us that a play is not a flat work of literature. It's not a description in poetry of another world, but is in itself another world passing before you in time and space. Fuchs provides a number of useful questions for play analysis that can help you think about what kind of world this playwright is creating for you. But I appreciate that she holds off on telling us to analyze the characters of this world until the very end, when she says, only after you have done all of this other play analysis are you ready to look at the characters. So in section 6, the characters fit the pattern. She says, only now are you really ready to examine the figures who inhabit this world. Every assumption you make about a character must reflect the conditions of its world, including the way psychology functions in that world. You can arrive at the most interesting version of any question about character by first exploring the features of her theatrical planet. Characters mean only as they inhabit, enact, fulfill, engage a succession of sights, actions, and objects under a specific set of conditions. They are constituents of a complex artistic pattern. Find the pattern first. So she warns earlier in the article that it's too easy to analyze the characters first because we often make the assumption that the characters on these other planets behave just like us. And oftentimes they don't. So keep that in mind as we go through the different types of dramatic characters that we see frequently in plays. I think we've already mentioned these characters or these types of characters in class, but two categories of characters are the protagonist and the antagonist. So the protagonist, I think we mentioned this when we were talking about the SOTA, the statement of dramatic action. The protagonist is the lead role of the play, the person whose journey we're following, the person who is trying to achieve something in this world. And the antagonist is the person who's thwarting the desires of the protagonist, the person who's putting up obstacles for them or preventing them from getting what they want. So some of the kinds of dramatic characters we see in plays are as follows. These are not the only way of categorizing characters. These are not the only categories we could come up with, but I think for our purposes this semester, this is a good start in describing the kinds of characters we're going to see. So archetypal, psychological, stock, depersonalized, and deconstructed. And then as we move through this PowerPoint, I will give you a little more information about each of those types. Archetypal characters are characters that transcend the particulars of their context or the stories. They embody the essence of particular human traits. So, for example, Medea in Euripides' play, which I've mentioned before, is a classic example of a woman wronged, a woman who is seeking revenge at all costs. And Euripides created that character, and then we see that that character has become an archetype. We see that kind of character repeated throughout the ages in different kinds of media. Willy Loman from Arthur Miller's play Death of a Salesman is also an archetypal character. So Willy Loman is a little man with big dreams, and those dreams are also kind of delusions. And he is trying to achieve them in the course of the play. And so again, that archetype of the little man with big dreams, the little man who can't succeed, that kind of underdog, transcends the circumstances in which Miller placed him, and we see that character repeated throughout time. Oedipus is another example of an archetypal character. So click through here to watch the trailer of Travieso's La Medea, so that you can get a sense of their production and that character, and how that character still resonates for us today. Psychological characters are perhaps the characters that we're most familiar with because they're the kind of characters that populate realistic plays. They're characters that are so detailed that we can understand their motivations and desires, and we can, as readers, fabricate a life for them beyond the world of the play. Stock characters are characters that are representative of a type. They're usually defined by their externals, so their class or their occupation or their marital status. And often stock characters will differ little from play to play. So one place in which we see a lot of stock characters is the Italian improvisational form Commedia dell'arte. This is a form that is full of stock characters like the one you see here on this slide. That's the Arlecchino character. He's the wily servant character. So he's a servant that sometimes outsmarts his masters, but often he gets found out and gets in trouble for it, though not ever too much trouble. Other examples of stock characters can be found in Japanese comedies called kyogen. Those we also see a wily servant character in kyogen. The melodramatic villain, for example, that is often found in 19th century plays, European plays. So a villain that is just so evil. That is a kind of stock character that we see repeated in plays of that time period. So you can click through to watch James Corden in One Man, Two Governors, which is actually an adaptation of an 18th century commedia play, and you can get a good sense of the stock character of the servant that he's playing in that play. Depersonalized characters are characters without a psychological past, but these are not stock characters. They're not identified by externals. Often they're used by playwrights to represent individuals who are caught in a dehumanizing world. They often are used to represent the postmodern condition. So an example is the two tramps in Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. So Vladimir and Estragon are these characters that are standing on a road. We don't really know why. They sometimes allude to the past, but they're unreliable. They exist mostly in the present, and they're waiting for someone named Godot to presumably come rescue them, but they don't know when he's coming or who he is or even if he's coming. And so while they're waiting, they fill their lives with these vaudevillian, meaningless games, repeating the same things day after day. So these are two examples of depersonalized characters. And if you click through here, you can watch a scene from Court Theater's production of Waiting for Godot. And it's a scene between Vladimir and Estragon, and you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. Finally, deconstructed characters are characters that reveal the self as performance. So they're characters that a playwright uses to show that all character is a performance of some kind of socially prescribed role. They often demonstrate that identity is something that is a creation of those in control of the social order. And so an example of this are the characters in Carol Churchill's play Cloud Nine, and this is a play that is in the Wadsworth Anthology. In this play, Churchill uses cross-gender and cross-race casting to explore the performance of identity. So in this play, for example, in the first act, Betty is a woman who's played by a man in order to show that Betty is trying to construct herself to be a man, and that man is her husband's image of a woman. And then, so in the first act, Churchill has written the play so that all of the actors' identities, most of the actors' identities mismatch with the identity of the character that they're playing, and then that shifts in the second act of the play. So you can click here to watch the trailer for the Studio Theater's production of Cloud Nine to get a sense of these characters.